It's starting.
There we go. Live, yeah.
Okay, we're live now. Hello, everyone. We're back for another Azure PowerShell and .NET community stand-up. I'm Aaron. Everyone can kind of introduce themselves. We introduced ourselves last time, but as we go through, unless you guys want to reintroduce yourselves, what do you think? How do you feel?
I'm Scott. This is Cormac.
Cool. Mark.
Yeah, I'm Mark.
We got Mark, and then Ricardo is joining us from the Azure Stack team. So Ricardo, do you want to just give us a quick introduction? Each of us kind of gave just a short introduction last time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Aaron. Hello, everyone. My name is Ricardo. I'm a program manager on the Azure Stack team, and Azure Stack, we're bringing Azure to on-premise. That's the short story on Azure Stack. My role in the team is to look at the developer focus of Azure Stack to make sure that folks can develop modern applications in the same way that they develop and design against Azure. They can design, develop, and operate on-prem using Azure Stack.
Awesome, thanks, Ricardo. So I think we actually wanted to kick off. Last time we started off with some of the work that we had recently completed, and I think that's what we wanted to talk about, a little bit of the Bootstrapper and Azure Stack work that we've been working on recently. So I basically am giving you and Mark free reign to talk about some of the work that's gone in, and maybe a little bit of the future work that we plan on having for Stack as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was thinking that I could start just with a refresh of what Azure Stack is and the main pillars of Azure Stack, and then I think Mark will be able to show a quick demo. Does that sound good, Mark?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. So the idea behind Azure Stack is, I briefly mentioned on my introductions, that Azure Stack is about bringing the consistency to Azure to on-prem. And what this consistency means is with Azure Stack, you are able to design, develop, implement, and maintain your application using the same concepts as you have in Azure. So all the ideas behind infrastructure as code with ARM templates, also all the rich automation using PowerShell and the other SDKs, with a portal experience that is the same as in Azure. So basically, Azure Stack is Azure, but you get to run it on your data center. And then one of the things in our team that we always talk with our customers is that the cloud is not a place. The cloud is a model, right? So with the consistency between Azure and Azure Stack, that means that, again, you develop and deploy against a known model, which is the Azure model, and then you have the choice to where you deploy your application. And Azure has a presence worldwide, and also Azure has different flavors. There is Azure Government, there is Azure on different regions, and then those different Azure clouds. And Azure Stack is just another one of those Azure flavors, and it's totally consistent with Azure. And then the idea is, you will be able to, for instance, you get a template, and that template has ARM resources that you deploy against Azure. You can use the PowerShell SDK and then target different endpoints for your instance of Azure Stack, and then perform a deployment of that template against Azure Stack. So that's the consistency. From a portal perspective, we use the same portal, it's the same experience, and when I say the consistency and that you have the same portal, the same PowerShell, is really the same capability that we have in Azure. And actually, the topic of this conversation is one example, right? Mark and the rest of the Azure SDK team, it is the same SDK, it's the same set of tooling. So that's what enables this consistency. And the consistency is key to allow you to deploy your apps where it makes more sense. And then, you may be following regulations, for example, that mandate that some of your resources reside on-prem. You may be working on disconnected scenarios. In the past few months, I've been engaging with several customers. Actually, right now, I think the list is around 100 or 110 customers I met personally in the last 3 or 4 months to discuss usage scenarios of Azure Stack. And we hear a lot, I wish I could have a way to, deploy my application that I currently deploy in Azure. I wish I could run this inside a mine shaft, or an oil field, or inside a shipping vessel, right? All these disconnected scenarios, they play a very important role. Also, data sovereignty, it is another role. And finally, it is the hybrid, right? With Azure Stack, you can really have a hybrid capability where parts of your application can reside on public Azure, parts of your application can reside on-prem, and then you have our rich set of tooling to orchestrate those resources in the different places. So this is a quick overview of Azure Stack, and just to kind of prepare a segue to the work that Mark is going to show. It is important to highlight that I talk about the consistency, and the clouds are consistent, but they will have different capabilities, right? Which means that different resources will be available at different versions in different clouds. And to make the development work easier, Mark and the team had put together some very cool features on PowerShell to help you work with those different flavors of Azure. And that's what Mark is going to show. So I think at this point, Mark, if you want to go ahead and bring the demo, and then we can talk a little bit more.
So yeah, that sounds great. I wanted to reiterate kind of the last point that you were making about consistency while we have sort of some different features on different versions of clouds. I mean, that's really like what it is that Azure Stack is sort of consistent with a snapshot of Azure from several months ago. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, if you think about disconnected scenarios, for example, that means that we'll have a snapshot of Azure that could only be as up to date as when that thing became disconnected. So what we're trying to do with this tool is sort of bridge the gap between the older versions of Azure features that exist on some of those sovereign clouds and in Azure Stack, mm-hmm. versus Azure, which is constantly moving forward pretty much every day. So let me share my screen. And so what I'm going to show you is a module that we just released as part of the technical preview 3 for Azure Stack, and that is the Azure RM Bootstrapper. And what this does is we've basically organized these different sets of features that existed in Azure at different times, and we're calling them profiles. And as part of Azure Stack TP3, we invented a new profile, and I'm going to show you this with this command. So what I can do, if I want to target a specific feature set in Azure that, say, is supported on Azure Stack, then I can use this command, use Azure RM profile. And if you give my slow computer just a second here, what I can do is select from the profiles that are available. So right now, I could select this 2017-0309 profile, which is the profile for Azure Stack TP3. or I can also select the latest profile, which would match everything that's in Azure. Over time, as versions of Azure Stack are released, we will see more of these profiles going out. But for right now, I'm gonna use that Azure Stack profile. And what this commandlet does is it loads up all of the modules that are consistent with those features in Azure. And just to show that, I'm going to log in and actually show you what's available here, and then contrast it with what's available using the latest profile in another window. So if I just go ahead and log in.
Now, Mark, while you're logging in, I had a question. Can I check out this Bootstrapper profile changes today?
Yeah, so right now this is available. Like I said, this went out with Azure Stack TP3, and so it's available on the PowerShell gallery right now.
Got it.
And basically, what it does, like I said, is manage the modules. It requires PowerShell 5, but it allows you to load up all the modules related with the particular set of features for the Azure cloud that you're targeting. And then run those commands and have a directed experience for the features that are available. So, for example, I'm going to try creating a new storage account. And because this takes a while, I probably won't actually execute it. But just to give you a flavor of what's going on, so you can see that I can provide a resource group name and a name for the storage account. I can do the different storage types, which people are probably familiar with. I'll just choose a standard locally redundant storage. And then, of course, I can give you a location. I'll just say West US. And I can provide tags, which I can do for every resource. But after that, that's pretty much, the rest of these are just kind of the standard PowerShell. So those are all the options that I have, because that's what's available in this version of Azure Stack. If, however, in this version of Azure. Now, if I were to use the latest profile over here, now my computer's a little slow this morning. I have to apologize. So we can show. I use the profile here. This is loading up the latest, and so that's going to have the features that are available right now in Azure. Which, as you'll see, for storage is quite a few different sets of features. So again, I'm going to have a new Azure storage account command, but in this case, I'm not only going to be able to, as soon as it comes up, so you can see it changed a bit. I could specify the storage account name, although actually I could do that. All right, dash. Hang on for just a second. So I have label. I have. Oh, yeah, well, it would help if I was using new Azure RM storage account, wouldn't it? All right. That's why that stuff was so different. Okay. Okay, so now we have resource group name. That looks better. See, live demo, people. And you can see now I have different things. So I can specify a SKU, which is similar to the type before. But there's also, and location, of course. So I can say like West US. But then there's all these other things like storage account kind. So I have the capability now to have storage accounts that are just for blob storage or regular storage accounts. I can also use cool or hot access tiers. I can also specify a custom domain name. So you can see there's just the whole set of features. So it allows me to see the features that are available for my particular Azure. If you want to see the modules that are in a particular profile, there are commands for doing that. So get Azure RM profile. If I run it like this, will actually show me the profiles that are installed on this system and what modules make those up. And if it'll eventually come back.
Now, Mark, if I don't have a profile currently installed, but I call use Azure RM profile, what happens then? Yeah,
so there's a set of commandlets in this Bootstrapper that first of all will allow you to install a profile.
Got it.
And second of all, to remove a profile. So there's an install Azure RM profile and remove Azure RM profile. And there's also an update. So basically, the profile is a set of features, but there may be bug fixes available for modules in there. And if you use the update command, that will allow you to update modules within that profile, so you get sort of the latest bug fixes that go with that feature set. The use Azure RM profile commandlet is special because it not only it will load the modules if they're installed, and if they're not installed, it will ask you if you want to install them. So it's basically just ensuring that you have the modules on the system and that they're loaded.
Cool.
So that's kind of the demo portion. So like I said, you can go and install this from the PowerShell gallery. It's azurerm.bootstrapper, and you can just use install module to install it and then play around with it. We're really interested to get your feedback. What we're thinking is that some version of these commandlets are going to end up shipping at standard with the Azure RM module. And eventually, I think where we're going with this for most users is that when you choose an environment, you will also be able to choose a feature set that goes with that environment. So it will be seamless when I point at Azure Stack, or when I point at the Azure German cloud or US government cloud, that I will get a feature set that goes with that cloud.
Cool. So before we move on from Stack, thanks for the demo, Mark. Like, I'm really glad we were able to do it live. Do you guys, like, what else do we have planned in terms of Stack support over the next kind of few months, I would say, going forward? Ricardo, you can comment as well.
So we should expect the profiles being going beyond the tooling. So we are heavily investing on having the experience of profiles to help the entire all the development facets against Azure Stack. I think that it's you mentioned the download of the Bootstrapper. That's great, but also I like to remind everyone, you can also download Azure Stack TP3 and try what we call the Azure Stack one node proof of concept. So it's something that you install in one single server, and then you can have the entire Azure Stack experience and use the great tooling that Mark and the team put together to exercise this.
So say I have a box just sitting around at home and I want to try out Azure Stack. That's I can actually go do that today.
I would not say it's not the box you have sitting around on your home. We require a considerable size box. We are talking about 128 gigs of RAM at least.
Yeah.
22 cores. Also a few disks available. We need at least 5 disks available, so you do need a server class hardware, but I would say it's an off-the-shelf server that you probably don't have on your house, but you may have on your data center.
And they can go, and someone who, say, if I did have that laying around at my house, they could go download the TP3 today and install it on that infrastructure.
Yes, so that's correct. And the way it works is you download the Azure Stack TP3 bits, and then we have a set of instructions that basically configures that given server to boot from a VHD, and that VHD runs, and basically we configure the entire Azure Stack infrastructure. And then you can experience that in one box environment. So I highly recommend folks taking a look at that. And I just wanted to wrap up. I think that the demo that Mark shows, it's one example of this consistency. And for those of you watching this video, keep that in mind on the possibilities that you have with a single set of tooling targeting these different Azure clouds. This is very powerful. And also at this point, I just like to thank Aaron and Mark, Scott, everyone on your team. I mean, you guys been great to work with. And that's a truly example how Azure Stack actually is not something we are putting together, copying Azure. We have, teams like yours working with us to make this Azure in your data center reality. So, thank you very much, and thanks for everyone watching. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us, Ricardo. We also, just so you know, we got a few specific requests to have someone from Stack come. Yep. So I'm glad you're able to join us.
And there are some other things that we can demo. So one thing we should work together on. I can come back here other times and show you some specific examples of how hybrid works. All the things I talk about, we can definitely come back in another time and show that as well.
Yep, that would be awesome. Appreciate you coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Now we're gonna switch the hot seat over to Cormac. So Cormac, just recently you've done some changes to the documentation pipeline and how the XML help works.
Yep.
So did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So recently, back in previous to last summer, we had the only mechanism for updating help for commandlets was to go in and use external tools to parse the XML, make your additions to it, make your updates to it, to commandlets that you're adding or any documentation that you wanted to update in the help. And then late summer, early fall, we added the functionality for a module called Platypus that the PowerShell core team developed, which allows you to transform the transform the XML help file into separate markdown files, a markdown file for each commandlet, and it presents the help for a commandlet in a presentable form that can easily be edited, can easily be read if you read it from GitHub, and then Platypus also allows for the transformation of the markdown back into an XML help. So we made the conversion to add all of these markdown files for each of the commandlets and put it into our repository. And just recently, we are now getting rid of the XML help in the repository, and the source of truth now in the repository is just going to be the markdown files for each of the commandlets. So whenever anybody wants to go in, a partner team or external contributors, if they want to go in and update the documentation for a commandlet, all they have to do is go in and edit the markdown file for the corresponding commandlet or commandlets, whatever they choose to edit. And that's it. They don't need to touch any of the XML files. That'll all be generated by us during build, and it'll make for a much better experience for everybody that wants better documentation, and it'll make it easier for external contributors to come in and not have to learn the ropes about what commandlets do I need to run, what do I need to update, what tools do I need. It's just going in, sending out a PR that edits some information in a markdown file for a commandlet, and that's it. That'll appear. If that gets merged in, that'll get displayed in the next release of Azure PowerShell, and it'll be up there whenever you do get help for the commandlet, or if you want to go in and look at the markdown in the repository, it'll be there as well.
Cool.
I want to say, since this capability came out, we've seen an awful lot of participation from the community, with people coming in and helping out with new examples for the help. So we want to kind of thank the community for coming in and doing that. We've seen a lot of help improvements since it's become easier to actually see how to edit the help.
I think that's one of the kind of the impetus for this change that Cormac has done recently, also decoupling the MAML generation from the markdown, because it was kind of like an extra step that was like too much of a barrier, in my opinion, for the community to contribute. Oh, you've got to get this platypus and generate the MAML from the markdown. But now that we'll be building that as part of the pipeline, the only source of truth and the only thing that we need for documentation is the markdown. And so hopefully that'll help improve the experience of all the people we have had contribute from the community.
Yeah, and another one of the great things that we get for this is that the online documentation that you see on docs.microsoft.com matches exactly what you're going to see in the repo, because those markdown files are actually the source for that documentation as well.
Yes, yeah, that might actually be a good segue to future stuff, because all of that documentation, we all cheated. We all know about it, but we want to talk about it publicly. So all of that documentation will be updated, I believe, next Wednesday, 4/5, April 5th. So, and to Mark's point, if you've seen some of our docs before, and if we want to, I can go over some of our other docs. All of the docs on docs.microsoft.com have an edit button, and they link themselves back to the source of truth in the repository. So you could be on docs, or I could be on docs and say, hey, that commandlet description is incorrect, or there's a typo here. If I just click that edit button, it'll take me straight to that markdown file. I can grab a fork, change the markdown file, commit, send a pull request, and now we've made the documentation world better for everyone in the next release of Azure PowerShell. So it's a win-win-win. Is that from a TV show? Isn't there a TV show where they say win-win-win? Something like that? I don't remember. Yeah, so we're pretty excited. That's one thing that, especially when that documentation gets pushed out to docs, I'll add that link to the description so that anyone who stumbles upon this community stand-up in the future and is interested can take a look at it and let us know. You can leave comments, and we're pretty excited about all the improvements that are happening in docs, especially in the Azure SDK space. So we'd love to have any community feedback or internal feedback on how we can improve that documentation. Did we have anything else in the quote-unquote things that have happened recently before we move on to future? I don't think I had anything else marked down. I just wondered if anybody else wanted to talk about anything.
No, I mean, we just came out with our latest release. Last time we're about to come out with a release on the 5th. So mainly these are sort of these interim releases that have individual features for individual service teams, and you can always look at the changelog to see what's there.
Mark, did we show the changelog last time? Do you know?
I think we did.
Okay. Cool.
I think we did, but it's available. It's available both in the PowerShell gallery and in the repository itself. So you should be able. There are lots of sources where you can get that information. The other thing we should probably talk about is that the May release that's coming up. This is going to be a breaking change release. It's going to be PowerShell 4.0. So all the things that you've seen in commandlets that are currently marked as obsolete will be gone. In that new release, and you can expect to see a migration guide, just like last time we had a major release. There'll be a migration guide that sort of shows what you need to change in your scripts to take the new features.
And if you've been using some of these commandlets that are breaking either in your scripts or just ad hoc through the command line experience. You should see warnings, right, about the things that will either be deprecated or changed in the next breaking release.
That's correct. So you should already be getting these. Not only will you'll get those obsolescence warnings when you use those things. So you should already be seeing that stuff.
Yeah.
But we will still have a detailed migration guide, so you can go through your scripts and see what the actual impact will be.
Yeah. Awesome. And at the same time, we're restructuring some of the repo, right? I don't know that we want to necessarily go into details, but that's part of the reason. We kind of are, one of the big pushes we've made is to try to reduce the number of breaking changes. And I'm pretty proud of the fact that we're pretty much at the 6-month mark, right? Our last breaking change was in October, I believe. I think it was October or November, and we've made it all the way to May without any breaking changes. So we've heard that in feedback, both internally and externally, and I think we've done a good job making an effort to reduce that breaking change frequency. And so the first one since October will be in May. And a lot of that has to do with the repo restructure, and then also we're doing some .NET Core work. that's part of the repo restructure, right?
Yeah, we're doing some .NET Core work. We're doing some work to make to bring the profile things that we talked about with Bootstrapper into the repo itself. And then we're also moving to the latest tools. So VS 2017 just came out, and lots of people building the commandlets are wanting to use the new Visual Studio. So we're moving all of that stuff at the same time.
Yeah, I think next time. So we actually released all of the management plane libraries as .NET Core compatible, and almost all of the data plane libraries are .NET Core compatible. So you can find those on NuGet. And part of that work to bring those libraries to .NET Core is because of the need to also move PowerShell to PowerShell Core. So I don't think we're going to show anything today on that, but I think we might be doing a demo either in the next community stand-up or the next one once we've got some of the commandlets moved over to PowerShell Core. Basically,
yeah, I think we should probably next time, but certainly one of the next 2 times.
I'll be excited about it, and I'm sitting on a Mac right now, so I could totally. I'm like way down to do that demo. That would be that would be cool.
You're on the hook for that now.
Yeah, that's me. Cool. So I think those were some of the big like future things we wanted to discuss. Is there anything else, Scott or Cormac, that you guys wanted to bring up about stuff coming soon, quote unquote? Nah.
Stump the band.
Nice. So part of what we wanted to do is, talk about what we've done, talk about what we plan on doing. But the biggest part, or the biggest reason we want to do these community stand-ups is to interact with the community. So some of the things we already talked about earlier, Mark mentioned, like, we really, really appreciate all the contributions that we get, both in code and documentation. But we definitely have seen an uptick in some of the documentation contributions, and keep them coming, I think, is what we want to say. If you have any questions or anything, we try to be active on GitHub, especially if there are code questions. If you have documentation questions, you can write comments straight on the documentation, and either I or our PowerShell writers will respond. And if you have questions or need fixes, then that's a great place to leave us feedback on that documentation. We're also, like, as I said, we're also releasing all brand new conceptual, we call it conceptual documentation for Azure PowerShell. How to install, how to get started, what do you do if you have problems with PowerShell Git, or what do you do if you're on an older version with PowerShell without PowerShell Git. And if you don't know PowerShell super well, how can you be successful with Azure PowerShell? And we'll teach you some of the basics on, where object, select object, things like that. So when that documentation lands, like I said, I'll add a link to that in the. I wonder if I can do one of those things where I put my hand up and there's like a link. I'll see if I can figure that out. But if you have any comments on that new documentation when it releases, feel free to let us know, because we have kind of a biased view of how PowerShell and Azure PowerShell works. And sometimes it's great to get feedback on, this section is a little bit confusing, or new users probably don't already know this and you seem to be glossing over it, things like that. So feel free to let us know if you have any comments on that new documentation. And like I said, I'm really excited about it. And I think the rest of the team is really excited about it. So yeah, see, Scott woohooed. That's rare.
Yay! So do we want to talk at all about scenario-based improvements to commandlets, or do we want to leave that for next time when we're concrete?
I would love to talk about it briefly. I think we still got a few minutes left, as far as I can tell, and I know I would like Cormac and Scott to go over some of the hot issue research that Cormac has been doing. But what Mark is referring to is some of the more, you'll notice that a lot of our work has to do with infrastructure that needs to be provided for interacting with Azure. So Azure Stack, moving to core so that cross-platform users can access their Azure resources from a Mac on Azure PowerShell. So we also, at the same time, we want to improve the experience of Azure PowerShell. So one of the ways we've thought about doing that is with what we call scenario-based commandlets and smart defaults. So Mark, since you brought it up, if you want to like kind of explain what we mean by that, and what we really want to do is talk about it here so that we can get feedback on, just cursory feedback on how people would view some changes to either scenarios in Azure PowerShell or defaults, parameter defaults, things like that in Azure PowerShell.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring this up because last time we talked a bit about the things that are coming up, like being more friendly to multi-threading, like some of the improvements in PowerShell compliance for a lot of the commandlets. And now this is something new where we actually want to look not only at that stuff, which is still high on our priority list, but also at improving the overall usage experience for the scenarios that people commonly do. So for certain kinds of virtual machine creation, for web app creation, for setting up a basic virtual network. So these kinds of scenarios, we want to identify these scenarios and then look at ways that we can improve the experience, where right now you might have to run 5 or 6 commandlets for something that really you should only have to run one commandlet. So places where we have commandlets that provide the entire flexibility of the API, but for most scenarios, you may not need to provide. Well, we're not going to get rid of any of the flexibility. We want to make it so that if you don't care about some of the more esoteric parts of a virtual machine, for example, that you can provide just a very small set of required parameters, and from that be successful.
I think one of the, as just an example, right, would be a simple VM create. We find that a lot of people use some of the scripts that are basically create a basic NIC, create a basic network security group, right? All these things that are required for a VM. And so we're kind of looking at that and saying, if people are generally creating a VM with these basic things as defaults, we should possibly provide an experience that is just create me a VM with these defaults. And if I need to, I can change that network security group later.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we shouldn't have to be. We should be able to make some assumptions about what you want with a VM when you don't provide all that other stuff. I should be able to access it via remote PowerShell. That port should be open. So there's some basic things that we can do to make people's job easier. It should be much easier to get to figure out what VM images are available to you and to get those. As part of that, and it should also, there are lots of places where you have to type values that you should be tabbing through, and so these are things like the most obvious one. If you looked at me doing the demo, where I have to type a location,
yeah,
right, and it's silly that I have to type a location.
It's a well-defined set, so we should be able to give you.
Yes, we should. PowerShell allows us to set up validate sets for that, so that people can just choose from the locations. So it should be very simple. It should also be possible for you to set up defaults for things like that, so that you do it once, and then basically, unless you say you want to do something else, this is what we expect.
Yeah, so
that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. One thing we're looking at as we do this is to actually, for a time here, to do some experience, to do some experiments around this that are where we actually see this is what we think will make this thing easier, and then look for feedback from the community on how we can improve this, whether this is working, whether it's the right direction. So that's why I wanted to bring this up here, because this is a plea to the community that as we do these things, we really want your feedback. The success of this stuff is going to be based on feedback we get from you among other feedback that we get. So
exactly, and we want those improvements to be impactful, which is why we want to provide some experimental commandlets that people can try out and then get feedback on. Is it easier to use? Would you use this? Would you improve your existing scripts if you did have different commandlets like this. So hopefully, I think I'll put that as a commitment on myself too. We can try to have something going on before the next community stand-up, so that we can talk about it and actually link to it link to the experimental module, let's say, in the description of that next community stand-up. So the other thing, that's a good segue.
Wait, don't segue yet. I want to pop one level. We absolutely want feedback on all these different things we're trying, but I also want to make sure that the community, you've got ideas. You've got things that you think would make this experience better. Just blast those at us. Be crazy, right? Don't think on the rails. Think of anything, and we'll consider it, and we'll roll it out in experiments.
Yeah, so that's a segue, exactly what Scott just said. That's a segue into the fact that what we're going to do, possibly every community stand-up, but at least starting with this one, we're going to create an issue in GitHub where the community can both recommend improvements, and we'll provide some of the big improvements that we've already thought of as a possibility. And I'll use that GitHub issue, so either find someone's comment and thumbs up it on GitHub, or add a comment, and I'll take that and I'll use that feedback and those recommendations to decide which experiments we'll run. Then we'll make experimental modules, and then next time we can talk about what is in those modules, and you, the community, and us, the feature team, can test it out, see what works, see what doesn't, and then make the overall Azure PowerShell experience better. Any other comments there? So I'll add that issue to the description links, and so that way anyone who stumbles upon this in the future can add a comment to that issue. Cool. So I think Cormac, you guys have screen sharing abilities. Did you figure that out over there?
You may have to do it.
I may have to do it? Okay, let's.
If you have quick access to the link.
I don't know that I do, actually.
That's fine. We can just talk about it like as an overview.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. And if you want, I'll grab that link and put it in the description as well.
Sure. So it'll probably go hand in hand with what you were just talking about, regarding the issues you want to see. And so what we did was we tried to compile a list of hot issues, issues that we found were getting a lot of comments. People are able to repro this issue. People that are blocked by this issue get a lot of emoji reactions on GitHub now, and so right. So we compiled a list of issues that had a decent amount of people who wanted this fix or were requesting this fix, stumble upon this issue, and so stuff like that we were considering putting inside of that issue that you were talking about, Aaron, about ideas that you want to see. I think that would be, these issues would probably fall right into the description, the top of the issue, so people can see like what the higher, not the higher priority, but like the
ones that we've kind of already analyzed as, having been reported, having been constantly commented upon and emojied.
Exactly. So those are issues that we'll probably pin inside of that issue that you create, and then people can, if people want to see that get fixed, then they can go to those issues again and keep putting up thumbs up or plus ones, however you'd like to state your opinion, and or they can comment in the issue that you are going to create. There's many ways that we can tackle this. So I think that we can just tackle two problems at once. These existing problems that people stumble upon, or people who might not know that there's an issue created for them yet, and say, hey, yeah, I have run into this issue before. I'm going to plus one this issue. I want to see this fixed.
Yeah. And
you can sort all that out on top of the issues or the comments that are left on your issue about ideas that you want to see. And that'll just make for a better experience when using Azure PowerShell. If we can sort out all these things that people are commonly requesting and running into, and we can fix those for later releases.
Yeah, awesome. So I think what we'll do then is, after I create that issue, I will take the research that you've done on the existing issues, we could put those as comments linked to the existing issues.
Yep.
But we kind of wanted to have one place to see where is the support coming from? What do people want to see first?
Yeah, and Aaron, where do you think is the best place to put this? We were talking about at the top of the README of the Azure PowerShell repository, somewhere in the README near the top, we have like feature request issue, and people, if you want to suggest an issue or suggest an issue that gets fixed or request an idea or something like that, we will have that pinned at the top of the README, so it has easy access for external contributors or possibly internal from Microsoft pitching ideas or want to have issues that they really want to see fixed.
Yeah, I'll pin that at the top of the README as well. Okay. That should be. And eventually we'll figure out a good way to put all of these. Scott. We'll figure out a way to put all of these on the GitHub as well. Maybe I'll just add a markdown file somewhere and just list them. So that way we'll have an entire history of all of these stand-ups. So do we have anything else that we want to discuss before we adjourn for today? Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. I think we covered everything that we wanted to talk about in pretty good depth. But check out the description for links and things. And then, as always, please interact and engage with us on GitHub for any comments, questions, or concerns.
Good night and good luck.
Thank you.